Good morning. The Turnitin presentation this morning is focused on our M&D students. You will see from the welcome slide that it states the M&D interim class September. This is because the majority of you would still be hosted within that class. That class has been extended to the end of the year to accommodate everybody who has registered this year and who need to finalize their submissions before you would be moved to the new platform in the new year. So let's continue. So first and foremost, before you engage with Turnitin, which is an originality checking system, you need to familiarize yourself with the concept of plagiarism. You need to be sure to know what that is. UNISA does not tolerate plagiarism. So you can view the policies and rules of conduct online. They are accessible directly to you as a registered student. If you've read these policies before, I do urge you to read them again. They are regularly reviewed and updated to ensure that they address the growth in the academic sphere. So moving on. What is plagiarism? Now, from the Turnitin desk side, we just rely on the Merriam-Webster's online dictionary definition of what it means to plagiarize. In essence, it is a false representation of the origin of the work. You can see from the scope of this definition that it addresses various areas of use of information that can be seen as being plagiarism. However, our focus with Turnitin is not on plagiarism itself, but rather on originality. That is the reason why UNISA uses Turnitin. It is in an effort to prevent plagiarism and to build academic integrity. Academic integrity is the value that the institution holds for all of its stakeholders. Without that integrity, your qualifications would not carry the necessary value or weight of what you have achieved during the study. A warning that you need to submit your work yourselves using your MyLife email addresses as confirmation in the formal UNISA space. Okay. This is very important. This warning is here to protect you, and it is there to protect your own authorship within the institution, as well as the intellectual property associated in that respect. Please make sure that you only submit your work yourself within the formal space where you are recognized with your MyLife email address and your password. Do not subject your work to external Turnitin accounts or to a family member or to colleague or a place of work, and be exceptionally careful of individuals who sell so-called Turnitin services, promising you a great Turnitin report, etc., etc. These individuals, they are often paper mills in disguise. They steal your work and they sell it off to other persons. And this causes a conflict within the final check of your work, and it will burden the proof of authorship unnecessarily if that does happen. It really does compromise you. So please make sure that you upload your work yourself. Also note that it's not the task of your supervisor or the librarian. You need to do this yourself. It's your work, your authorship, your ownership, meaning your responsibility. The Turnitin activation. As a registered M&D student, you are automatically enrolled within the formal UNISA Turnitin space. As indicated, you are currently in a temporary or in an interim class online. This is where your profile is hosted, and that is also the space wherein we will protect your submissions within the UNISA Turnitin account. Your MyLife email must be active. This is most important because any information regarding Turnitin will be communicated only via your MyLife email address. This is your formal communication method with the institution, and it also serves as verification of your profile in itself. You do not require any program installation. For this specific class where you have been enrolled, you only need web access with a browser, and then you can view your profile online. Okay. We do provide you with an FAQ list that is specifically for M&D students. There are a number of Turnitin FAQ lists, in other words, frequently asked question lists within the institution, due to the fact that we are currently between different platforms. So when you do consult a FAQ list, please make sure that you are consulting the one for M&D students, because this will guide you on the specific submission space where you have been allocated, and that will also inform you of what is required or expected for your specific submission, and will give you the necessary advice that would allow protection of your submissions within the UNISA Turnitin space. Okay. As part of that protection process, you do need to be aware of the fact that UNISA relies on all-inclusive originality reports. Okay. All-inclusive means that your submissions do need to have title pages as well as bibliographies or reference lists. The title page. This helps to protect your submission as being your own document. It helps to confirm the authorship of the specific submission. When I say a title page, it doesn't mean you have to have a formal title page like the one that you would use for the completed thesis or dissertation. You can simply have a paragraph at the beginning of the chapter that you're uploading that states your name, your student number, and what you are uploading at the date. Or for instance, if this is chapter 1, the final that you have submitted. Then the bibliography or the reference list. This is also required for you to include this with every submission, because that serves as confirmation of the research content within your specific document and helps to verify origins of the information and distinguishes your own work from other existing sources. Also note that your submissions are stored permanently within Turnitin. And this is also done in such a manner so as to ensure that any attempts in future from an individual to try and plagiarize from your work would then be identified going forward. Hence the reason for that. And also you are alerted to this fact so that you can make sure that you upload the correct version of your work to the correct space. Okay. File sizes, they do need to be less than 100 megabytes, and your paper length needs to be 400 pages or less. If it does happen that your final thesis or dissertation exceeds the paper length of 400 pages, please do contact the UNISA Turnitin desk so that we can assist you. The reason for this is that you cannot divide your final thesis or dissertation or upload it in parts. We require a comprehensive report for the examination process, and for protection of the database, it will only allow you 400 pages. Therefore, you would contact us and we will accommodate any submissions that are in excess of 400 pages. Also important to note, your file types. It needs to be .docx in MS Word, your submissions, or a PDF document. However, the Word version is preferred, and comes with less challenges if you need to upload, especially if you are an international student. The PDF, note that you cannot upload a scanned PDF document. It must be an electronically created one. In other words, meaning that you typed your work in Word and you saved it as a PDF document. File inclusions. As noted in the previous slide, we make use of all-inclusive submissions. and reports. So it needs to have your title page in there. It needs to have a bibliography or reference list, or where footnotes are applicable, that should be included. Your declaration and index images, graphs, or tables, whatever is required from your submission, stays within that specific upload. Okay, so you do not cut anything from the submission, otherwise that would be incomplete and would void your specific submission. And please do remember that you have to take care with the option that you do select online, because your submissions are stored permanently. When you go into the appropriate platform where you will be submitting your work, you have to check that you choose the correct option. So it will either say something like a proposal draft or a proposal final, chapter 3, a draft or a final, or the complete thesis and dissertation that you would use only at the end of the study when you have completed your research and you are ready for the examination process. Okay. The file, you can retrieve it from your computer directly, whether it is on stored in the computer itself or on a memory stick that is plugged in. Alternatively, if you are familiar with Dropbox or Google Drive, you could use those options as well to retrieve the document that you would be uploading. Once you've uploaded, Turnitin will email you a digital receipt after your successful upload. That receipt goes to the My Life email address. The receipt is a very short note. It's only 3 lines. It simply confirms that Turnitin has received your specific submission and that it will start processing it. That receipt, that proof, that email that you received can be forwarded to your supervisor to alert your supervisor that you have made the submission, and that would allow the both of you to look at the originality report once generated so that it can be discussed and that you can use the guidance, the advice from your supervisor on what needs to be changed, or where you have to expand on information or improve with the content, so that you can rework your draft submission and then upload the revised version of your document. Okay, this is an example of what you can expect to see online. So when you are logged into your specific class, it might say there is a research proposal. It can say revision 1 or revision 2, which would be the final option for your upload. The idea is that you upload your first draft of your document, and once the report has been generated, you may review that report. You are privileged at UNISA to view your originality reports, and then you can discuss the findings with your supervisor. Your supervisor is able to assist you and guide you on what the expectations are, any instructions that you need to follow, and will give you the necessary guidance on what needs to be done, or what reference style should be used or is best for that specific section of the work. Or perhaps if you have, let's say, used too many quotes, for example. So the overutilization of quotes would also be a concern. So you might be advised to paraphrase your work more, etc. You then can apply the guidance that you received from your supervisor, rework your original document, come back and upload the revised version of your work. Then Turnitin will generate a fresh report for you on that specific date that it was uploaded and can be reviewed anew. If it is still necessary for you to make any changes or improvements on the submission itself, you do have a third opportunity to do that. So you can revise again according to the guidance from your supervisor, and then you can upload the final version of your document. Now on this slide, I also want to tell you that you do not need to stress. If you upload your draft proposal then your revision thereof and the final, they will not conflict with each other. In other words, if you've done the draft and you then do a revision or a final, it is not going to pick up on your draft. It will not reflect as if you have plagiarized yourself or your own work. Because you upload yourself within the formal space, this space is set up to recognize your authorship, so it will not show a conflict. If there is a conflict, it means it is outside of this specific space, and that is correct. It means that there was an undue or unsolicited submission of content of your work in another space. So please be very careful regarding your work, okay, that you do need to upload it within the formal space only. So this image might vary slightly depending on the specific space or college where you are enrolled. But in essence, those are the three options you have, and you do have these options: the draft, the revision, and the final. For your proposal, you do have that for every chapter. The opportunity is then again there for your final completed thesis or dissertation, where we generate a comprehensive report for the whole thesis. And then should there be any need to rework your submission, let's say per instruction from an examiner, then the option is there to rework it and then upload the complete submission again for a fresh report. Okay. What happens when you upload your work? When your work gets run through Turnitin, Turnitin will generate an originality report. Please note, this is not plagiarism report. Never refer to it as a plagiarism report. This is not what Turnitin does. Turnitin originality checks the originality of the content. Okay, so it generates either, you can refer to it as a similarity report or an originality report or a report of non-original content, but it is not a plagiarism report. Your document, when received by Turnitin, is taken into the database and the content is compared to different repositories to compile the specific report, and it will draw from all of the similarities that it has identified within the database to compile the report. You can see that there are 4 different repositories. So first one states periodicals. This is actually a very loose term, but it is just put to cover all sorts of publications and periodicals or journals or conferences data within the database. Then, of course, there is the internet repository, which covers both the current and archived internet sites. We do have the UNISA paper repository. Please do not confuse this with the institutional repository, which is hosted by the UNISA library. That is an official public site and falls under internet, under the internet space. The UNISA paper repository is paper submitted within UNISA itself. And then we have the student paper repository that would include all submissions nationally as well as internationally. You might not be aware of this fact, but all major institutions within South Africa do make use of Turnitin, as well as the majority of African universities also use Turnitin, as do many institutions on other continents in the rest of the world. So you can understand that it does take a bit of time to generate a report, as it has to run through millions and millions of submissions and sources of data within the database. Hence, the reason why we say that you do need to allow 24 hours for the report to be generated in full and made available. The nice thing is, once you have submitted, you do not have to sit and wait for the report. When you receive your pop-up screen that says your submission was received successfully, you can exit the the submission space, and you can go back on the following day to view the report. Okay, what does the report do? The report will highlight any content in the submission that was received which is not original. In other words, if it finds a match in the database, it means that it's not original, it is similar to another source within the database, and that would be highlighted. So if your submission does contain copied content from another source, then obviously that would be highlighted. But the use of discipline-related terminology can also be picked up, of course, names and titles. If you use direct quotes, items from your bibliography or reference list, any citations within your submission can be picked up because those are not original. The proper analysis can only be done by your lecturer or supervisor to identify if plagiarism is present in the document or not. Please, you do not struggle with this on your own. The intent here is not for you to analyze your own reports. It is not your task. That is the task of your supervisor, as your supervisor does have the expertise and is specialist within that specific field and would be able to guide you. It is hence very important that you understand the difference between something which is not original as opposed to something that is plagiarized. Now, I trust my colleague would not mind if I use him as an example. So let's say Dr. Machila presents a paper at a conference and I am in attendance. Now, during his presentation, he makes a profound statement, and I want to use that statement in my own work because I find that that speaks directly to my own research. May I do that? Yes, of course I can. I can do that, and I may. So I can use that statement he made. I can include it in my own work. I can quote the statement. So I put it in inverted commas and I acknowledge the source of the information. So the statement was made by Dr. Machila. What will happen if my work goes through Turnitin? If my work goes through Turnitin, that sentence would be highlighted as being not original. Is that correct? Yes, of course it's correct. It is not original to my own work, to my submission that I have authored. But did I plagiarize? No, I did not, because I quoted and I have acknowledged the source of the information. However, let's say I did not quote and I did not acknowledge the source of the information, and I include that statement still in my own work. So I am now using that statement that was made and I'm pretending that it's my own and that is part of my work and my findings. Okay. What will happen if my document now goes to Turnitin? The same thing. That portion in the text, that specific sentence would be highlighted because it is not original to me as the author of the submission. But in that instance, I did plagiarize because I didn't give any acknowledgement or credit to the source of the information. I used it as is. I gave a false representation of the origin because I pretended that that is my own statement. That's a difference between something which is not original as opposed to something that was plagiarized. So so everything which is not original, everything which is highlighted is not necessarily plagiarism. So it doesn't mean that everything highlighted within your document requires change or requires a reference. Therefore, it is so important that you do discuss the findings with your supervisor. Your supervisors are trained in the analysis of the reports that are generated by Turnitin, and they can guide you accordingly to the expectations, topic for your research, the specific field, and what would be permissible within your specific submission. So remember that the percentage that you are going to see on your report is a similarity index. Please, again, you do not refer to that as plagiarism or a plagiarism percentage. It is not an indication of plagiarized content. It is merely an indication of non-original content. So again, I emphasize the importance that you do need to discuss the findings with your supervisor. Please don't wait until the end of your study. Turnitin is made available for you from the start. So from proposal stage right up until the end, so that you can have the advantage every step of the way. If you've done a chapter, do discuss the report with your supervisor so that you can learn from that findings and that you can apply the advice that you received from your supervisor going forward, rather than waiting until the end and then discover that you have to revise a substantial portion of your work in that case. So, and also don't try on your own to try and revise your work. Please discuss it with your supervisor so that they can assist you on the best way to address the information. Now here we have an example of what you can expect to see when you open your originality report. On the left would be the content of the specific submission, and the column on the right-hand side will show you a breakdown of all the matches found within the database. At the top, what I've encircled here in blue, the 43%, that is the similarity index, but you can also see that we do have percentages in the column on the right-hand side that I've put in triangles there. Now, these are the individual matches. So let us start there. My number one, you can see, is in red, and on the left, I have text highlighted in red, and they are marked with a little number one. In the beginning of each match, there will be a small block with a number in it, and they are color-coded for ease of reference. In other words, everything in my submission on the left-hand side, highlighted in red and marked with a number one, means that it matches source number one in the column on the right-hand side. And then there is a percentage. My number one in this example is 17%. This tells me that from the content of the submission that I can see on the left, 17% matches number one. In this case, it is an internet source. It is information that I retrieved from Wikipedia that I had included in my submission, and that was identified. So note, although you can only see the first paragraph of my submission, in the rest of the document, I do have other instances as well. All of them together amount to the 17% match. My number two, you can see, is highlighted pink. It says 14%. On the left, we have the first example there, where a portion of the text was highlighted in pink, marked with a little number two. So all of the matches to number two within the whole of my document amounts to 14% in that specific match. So these are the individual sources identified with their respective percentages. Okay. The color coding in itself bears no meaning. In other words, it doesn't mean if it is red that it is bad, or if it's green that it is good. The only reason the color coding is there is to make it easier to identify the different matches and align them with the different sources. Now, number one would always be the highest match, and then the percentages will decrease to the lesser matches. So you can see my number one is 17%, number two is 14%, my number three is 12%. Now, what we look at is we look at the use of the individual matches, those sources that have been utilized within the specific document. And for that, we provide you with a guideline. Your guideline for that is 5% for an individual match. In other words, I can immediately see that I have relied heavily on source number 1, and it says 17%, which is way above the guideline of 5%. Now you might think that 5% is a very wide guideline. Yes, it is. But we set such a wide guideline to accommodate incidental matches. In other words, it will cover things like names and titles or subject terminology that you might be using within your document. Common phrases. It could even accommodate for short quotes used within the specific document or a prescribed template that was used within that specific document. So 5% is a very wide guideline, but it does cover the scope for an all-inclusive report. So it means that my individual matches do need to be less than 5%. My number 2, even my number 3, both of them are way above the guideline that I have. So I can immediately see which sources I have relied heavily on and that I may need to revise, or I have to find different sources to prove my point or to support the research that I am presenting within my specific submission. If you adhere to that guideline, by default, your overall similarity index will decrease as well. However, your focus is never on the similarity index itself. In other words, the 43%. The reason being that UNISA does not tolerate plagiarism. Okay, so therefore, we emphasize the use of the Turnitin, the originality check throughout the time of study to ensure that you deliver original content in your submission. Okay, so your own voice needs to be heard within that submission. There are specific conditions where a certain percentage could be acceptable, but it is important that you have to follow the rules and regulations provided to you in your respective guides or tutorial letters or additional supporting documentation that you might receive from your supervisor as well, and according to the institutional policy and rules of conduct, as well as M&D procedures. Your supervisor can also go to the internet, can also go to the library to see what other people have said about that specific topic. But the expectation is to hear your voice. They want to hear what you think and what you need to bring forward within the task at hand. So that is what is most important. So therefore, there is no acceptable percentage for the similarity index because of the fact that plagiarism is not tolerated. We do not ask what your similarity index is. We ask, is plagiarism present in the document or not? So this means you could potentially have a submission with a similarity index, let's say, of 10%. So maybe and then that document is analyzed. So maybe 10% might sound like a low percentage, but if the analysis reveals that there's blatant plagiarism in the content, that is still not going to be acceptable. But potentially you could also have a submission with a 20% similarity index. And when the document or report is analyzed, it is found that there is no blatant plagiarism within the specific document, then that percentage could be acceptable. So please adhere to the guideline for your individual matches. This is the best opportunity that you have to not fall prey to inadvertent plagiarism due to lack of knowledge, by discussing it with your supervisor and by engaging with material from the library that you can improve on the content of your specific submission. You have to paraphrase using your own words. So not the paraphrase content from another individual, but your own. and you use your quotes sparingly. Be very careful of the overutilization of quotes. And then, of course, if in doubt, cite your sources. And remember, our guideline for the individual matches, it needs to be less than 5%, okay, for an individual match. Then, for content support, contact your personal librarian. Make sure that you know who that is. They can direct you to research ethics information, information on research integrity, as well as referencing styles. You can consult the LibGuides online. We really have a fabulous library at UNISA and very good subject or personal librarians that can assist you and direct you on where to get information to improve on your academic writing. And that will help you not to fall prey to plagiarism. It is very easy to step into that trap, especially when you are starting out with your research. If you have not done research before, if it's your first attempt at a proposal, you might not realize the manner in which you are utilizing information derived from a source can be seen as plagiarism. Then, of course, you also have the plagiarism.org website that you can visit as well. They have very nice short articles that help you to prevent plagiarism when you do write, for example. Just keep in mind that this is an international site, so it might not address finer points of clarity which are expected within your specific college or is a requirement from your specific subject field, but in overall it will also guide you so that you can prevent plagiarism in that regard. Please note, your MyLife email must be active. If you do not have an active MyLife email, or if there is any problem with your MyLife account, you need to contact the MyLife help at unisa.ac.za, because all of your Turnitin communication will be sent to the MyLife email. That email, you do get that. It is, again, something that's provided to you by UNISA the day that you register for the first time with the institution. And that is what we use for your Turnitin profile as well as for verification, so that we are sure that we are communicating with the correct student. This is really important, especially where Turnitin is concerned, because your profiles are confidential, as are the different originality reports generated within that specific space. We do protect your authorship in that regard, hence the reason for verification with all communications that we do receive. Then, of course, with the Turnitin itself, you first consult the FAQ list. The FAQ list will cover the majority of your questions that you might have, and it means that you can immediately answer any question that you have. If you have an alternate problem, as an M or a D student, you may write to the Turnitin desk at unisa.ac.za, and we will assist you accordingly. If you do write to the Turnitin desk, and please make sure, well, you need to make sure in any communication with the institution that your student number is included in the subject line. And if possible, include your qualification as well, and sign your emails with a full name. Don't just write to the desk and put in the subject line help and put in I need Turnitin. We need a bit more information to challenge, to channel your communication to the correct space, because otherwise we are served with a challenge to verify the details manually, and that delays response times with regards to your query. So please make it as comprehensive as possible when you do write to the institution. The reason also for when we request you to sign with your full names It means that we do have thousands of students, and we do have many students with the same first and last names. So having that in conjunction with your student number just makes it so much faster to verify your identity and align that with the profile that we do have in that regard. And this has brought me to the end of the presentation.